William,
incredible.
you share something. I'm largely a practitioner. I go out there and try and convince people to use more reliable measures. You're in the same boat. It's a struggle. It is. It can be a struggle. What do you think needs to be done to sort of begin to diminish faddism and raise awareness of the the quality end of the spectrum?
Oh wow. Trading standards could get involved.
Mm.
I mean, I'm really not. That's not a joke. I really think. I was reading about what's is it? Elizabeth Holmes, Theranos. You know, the lady. She kind of did her best impression of Steve Jobs, and I think she's in jail just now. Do you
Yeah,
know what I'm
yeah.
talking about? And she developed. Oh well, she claimed to have developed a small device that would do rapid blood testing. As I understand it, I might be butchering this, but this was probably like a year ago now. It was in the
Mm.
papers and things. And so she dropped out of a business school in the States, claimed to have set up this startup, started wearing turtlenecks and all this kind of stuff. And there's some quite interesting kind of documentaries on her. I think there's even like a wee drama series about her. Anyway, so she got a load of money, a huge amount of money actually behind the company. And it's a really interesting case study around sort of groupthink, all this kind of stuff, toxic leadership. And it all came out in the wash that effectively the device that created the technology didn't work. And so all these claims the company were making about revolutionizing blood testing, speeding it up, rapid results and stuff like that. So she's in jail for developing a test that was not reliable and valid.
That might have prevented someone from going to the GP and testing something using a valid and reliable measure.
That has an opportunity cost. That's the bit that I think often really needs to be brought to the fore, is that once you induct people into a way of thinking, you'll get a lot of confirmation bias. So I heard that in what you were saying, John, about, if we just stand back and think about it subjectively, the evidence of our own eyes tells us that people are more complicated than 4 colors or 16 types. But if I've spent my money and I've spent my time and I've had someone very credible and charismatic and persuasive inducting me into that line of reasoning, the chances are a significant number of people will then just go with confirmation bias because it's in there now. And human history is. I was chatting to someone who's a couple of weeks ago who's commercializing some of the research around personality, and he was saying, "Look, William, don't stress too much about this. This is just what humans have always done since the dawn of time. Come up with some ideas that are maybe a bit shaky, and then refuse to let them go." And I thought, okay, like that's true. I've probably got a few of those kicking about in my own head when I throw salt over my shoulder when I spill it and things like that. So, and then look, nothing bad did happen to me. It's like they're confirmed. What needs to happen? I don't think trading standards are going to bother with this one. I think the professional bodies and institutions could really start to think about the standards they set. I think that there's a systemic problem with the buyers within organizations not having the information at their fingertips to make, again, just buyer beware. Buyer beware, caveat emptor. And then the other thing is, I think, bridging the divide between academia and industry. And I think in the gap that exists, things will move in to fill it. And those things will be incredibly easy to use, incredibly well marketed, but there's no real incentive for them to be robust. I was looking at Penn State University have some quite interesting research around psychometrics, and they have some stuff that you can use. They have a version of the Neo 120 item one, a 300 item one for free, and it's a great tool, and it's got loads of research behind it and all this kind of stuff. The website is white with black text.
Yeah,
not hitting a color on the website. The consent button to allow you to then take the test is buried in the 6th paragraph, and it is about 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters square on the screen. So they are giving away for free one of the best researched and most powerful tools you can use in personality, but they haven't bothered to spend, I don't know, $1,000 to make it look nice.
Mm.
yeah.
Because it's
That's
just not.
not
It's
their
just not on
job.
the radar. No, it's not their job. It's not on their radar, and there's no incentive for them to make it look nice because they get enough people taking it every year that they can feed that into some research, and that's it. But
Hey,
go on.
I was going to say, when I do this presentations coaches, I put up this like quadrant of if you imagine sort of X and Y axes of being the sort of evidence behind something and the prevalence of its use. So you'll have some things will be in that kind of top corner that would be behind both. So something like, if you look over the last couple of decades of smoking cessation, right? Loads of evidence saying smoking is really bad for you. And if I was giving that talk in the 70s, 80s, 90s, do you know there was still loads of evidence that said it's bad for you, but it would have been in a different element of that quadrant. It would have been, there's loads of evidence, no one's listening to it. And then it gradually moved into there. Things like climate change are still tons of evidence, but there's minimal, or not minimal, but it's increasing, but it's still like it's not moved up that prevalence axis. But then there's those other things in that other kind of corner that are highly prevalent, no evidence around there. And I'm thinking if some of the coaches that are sat in there who they do want to have integrity to what they do, and I do believe most coaches, maybe I'm just being an optimist, but I believe most coaches genuinely want to deliver something that has meaning behind it. So they might be thinking, all right, that's interesting. I need to upskill in my kind of buyer beware. I need to know. So what is it that I'm looking for? So what kind of advice would you give them? What kind of things do they need to look for if they're going to a website for a tool to think, oh, what's the legitimacy behind this?
The straight answer would be reliability and validity. So that is just your from my perspective, your basics. So what defines a good test? And this is not limited to personality testing. This is any test of anything. A good measuring tape is reliable. A poor measuring tape will give you different results. I had a friend that bought one of those nice little, the little laser measuring things. That you just sit up. He was all very happy about this, except it got dropped and took a bump, and then it started to give grossly different readings. And there was me with my old-fashioned measuring tape, so I'm feeling quite smug. But this is a kind of universal principle that what I find so fascinating about sort of coaches, leadership facilitators, and things like that is that in some domains they would be absolutely aghast at using measures that were not reliable and valid. And yet when it comes to measuring people, that same sort of skepticism doesn't necessarily trigger. I do think there's a deeper level of belief. I think what you're saying is true, John, about, a lot of coaches want to have integrity in what they do. And, I feel it's quite arrogant for me to say it's not, they're acting without integrity if they deploy one of these tools. But I find it very hard to come up with a set of sentences that make the connection between having integrity and deploying a tool that's not reliable and valid.
That's a really interesting point, William. John and I are engaged in a project at the moment with one of the world's biggest coaching organizations, probably the one that's got the most integrity. And one of the things we've learned from working with people at the top end of it is that 80% of coaches don't use psychometric measures.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, and that's kind of an amazing statistic, because if you look at what coaching is, a good quality psychometric measure would add so much to coaching practice.
Depending on when you use it, how you use it, all that kind of stuff. So there's what it is, then there's how you use it. I mean, I think a lot of psychometrics are deployed on training courses rather than necessarily coaches. So that'd be more sort of facilitators, all that kind of stuff. The HR department are quite keen usually on psychometric. The other aspect that I think is really important to think about is the underlying beliefs of these kind of professions, of which I belong. So I'm not throwing stones, but people development, coaching, facilitators, trainers, all that kind of thing. We are working in the field of human potential. And therefore, one of the underlying beliefs is that people have a huge amount of potential. And I also believe that. That's one of the reasons I get out of bed every morning, is I'm really passionate about helping people to get to where they want to get to. The really extreme form of that belief is you can be anything. And what a good quality measuring tool will do will say, actually, there are some limitations. It is highly, highly unlikely that I could be a professional jockey.
Yeah.
It's highly unlikely that I could be a professional basketball player.
Surely you just need to dream it and believe it.
I just need to train harder. I just need to train harder. And it's that kind of thing where we're saying, look, if someone said to me, look, I'm the shape that I am, I have a certain degree of bone mass, I have a certain degree of organ mass and connective tissue that if I go below that, I'll probably expire. But I really, really want to be highly competitive in horse racing. If you put, I'm not the biggest, but I'm not the smallest. But if you put me on a horse in the Grand National, it's going to be looking at the horse in the next stall, going, what did I do to deserve this lump on my back compared to what you've got? So I think when it comes to sort of the limits of what's possible physically, people are a lot more realistic about that. And sometimes when I talk about this, people say, oh, that's deterministic, or that's your unlimiting mindset and things like that. And it's like, well, like, go on then, like, win a gold medal in swimming. Show me that, because there's some really good evidence about that there are certain physical characteristics that are very, very helpful in swimming. And it's not to say there won't be the exception to the rule, but the exception to the rule is just that. It's not the rule itself. Where coaches and leadership development facilitators and OD consultants and HR and all these people start to get nervous is when you start to say, well, there might be other aspects of us that have constraints. Mm-hmm. There might be aspects of our personality that lend themselves better to certain environments than others, and those might vary across the population. Mm-hmm. And I think the underlying belief of you can be anything you want to be, and as your coach, I'm here to facilitate that. I think it's beautiful. I think it's wonderful. I think if you take it to the extreme, it's also abusive, because the reason that I am not Albert Einstein is that I simply haven't tried hard enough.
Yeah. Especially if you then start thinking that even effort or hard work, as people call it, is highly dependent on aspects of personality, such as conscientiousness.
Yeah.
But also some biological psychology, such as the amount of grey matter that you need to be born with, in aspects of parietal lobe and things like that. So some people are kind of predetermined to pay more attention to things and for longer. So they're gonna come across as hard work. I hate that.
That is a controversial statement right there, John. You're telling me that someone's brain is different to mine, and that will lend things to coming easily in their life than it will in mine.
It is strangely, it seems to be a controversial statement. Yeah, that hard work is harder for some people than it is for others, depending on the kind of way they're wired. Like you see those things a bit like the sort of dream it, believe it. Things that take no talent and turning up on time. That assumes everyone's the same. Like if you think about how you consider time, right, is similar to how you might consider objects in the distance. So some people might be long-sighted or short-sighted. They're better at seeing things that are further away or closer to them or whatever. And like when we're imagining this sort of abstraction of time, doesn't it make sense that for some people, they're better at perceiving how long tasks are going to take than others? Yeah. So being on time isn't just a complete free choice that you choose to do or not to do. So some people are a bit late because they're not very good at perceiving time and they make mistakes, and they can work at it and they can develop strategies, but that's the way they're wired. Right? People are like that. And I like this kind of, it is positive psychology. It sounds negative, mm-hmm. but it is about looking, how can you get towards that potential? But geez, let's be.
William, in response to my earlier question about how do we deal with faddism, you came up with one great suggestion, and that's sending the less reliable test publishers to prison. I love that. Yeah, I think we'll try to work on that. But the other one was
Hope and
about
dream.
really getting professional bodies more engaged in educating both their members and the people in the wider world. And I just mentioned earlier that one of the big coaching bodies had identified that 80% of the coaches don't use psychometrics. They also identified that most didn't use psychometrics because they didn't know what they were.
Mm.
Yeah. And there's a big education gap.
Oh yeah, but you know the majority of coaches that are completely ignorant about, say, personality, and you think, well, it's probably okay for civil engineers to be ignorant about personality. It's going to be helpful for how they work with each other, but you don't need to know about the research on human personality to build a bridge. If everything you do every day is highly connected to humans and human performance, it's probably quite helpful to make it your business to learn as much as you can about these ideas and then go on to use the tools where and how they're helpful. So I think there's both sides of that. I think it's there's the tool, but there's also the knowledge and insight embodied in the tool and how the tool was developed that I think is a huge part of what gets missed sometimes.
Yeah. That presupposes that the tool is rooted in sound psychological theory.
Otherwise, yeah, exactly.
And again, that takes us back to an earlier discussion.
And this is, I think what that does is it touches on a really important point, that there has to be a sound conceptual model behind the tool. And tools that exist as measures, the way that they should evolve is actually psychological theory evolves through something that researchers want to be able to test, because we want to see evidence that it can have an impact on something. Now, if we're going to test, because a concept is something that you can't just cut open someone's brain and take something out and go, look, this is the
You're right, yeah.
So we develop concepts, which aren't real things, they're abstractions. Like efficiency doesn't exist, but you can measure, time and cost and, accessibility and stuff like that. So then we can come up with this abstraction. So then we try and develop a way of measuring this abstraction, this concept, in order to be able to test it. And that's certainly so like a toughness measure. That's what it was developed for. It was developed to undertake psychological study. And then when we found, geez, this actually seems to make a difference in things. It predicts things over and above, conscientiousness and extroversion and things in the big five for well-being and performance. And that's when someone like Doug comes along and goes, oh, that might be useful for people in the real world rather than just us academics talking about it. So it's this kind of, I suppose, more organic sounds such a cheesy word because people overuse it, but it's sort of this more organic way of it. It developed because we wanted to be able to measure something in order to do some research to see if it had an effect. And then the measure seemed like it had some usefulness. Whereas sometimes the measure is developed because it's a commodifiable product. And the other stuff never happens. Like it's just the development of a measure. And I never knew that existed until, probably the last 10 years or so, getting involved in the coaching.
It's really back to front. It's really back to front. Instead of starting with a hypothesis and then, like you say, coming up with a construct to try and conceptualize that thinking and then testing that construct hard, what happens is they come up with the construct through just sitting down and thinking about it, and then they either just don't bother. They just take it as gospel. They're just like, right, okay, I've thought of this. I think it's correct. If it sells, that's great. But then even research that is engaged upon, it's all very, very biased. Like there's an organization that published a piece of research in collaboration with a university, and it's I don't know, maybe about 50 odd pages, and it's just not great. It's just not great. And you think had that research been done before the model was created and the company founded and the product sold, you probably would have just abandoned the construct and gone and looked at a different construct or a better construct, or you'd have refined the construct. But a lot of these companies are stuck with the construct that they have, and they back themselves into a corner. They can't edit it because what have they been selling to?
evidence for something that I've already decided.
That's it. That's it. So, I mean, that piece of research is so funny because they're like, we did factor analysis and we postulate that it's a two-factor model. And lo and behold, the factor analysis found that it is a two-factor model. And I'm sitting looking at it and going, well, it's a grid with 4 colors. So that doesn't look like a two-factor model. That looks like a 4-factor model. And what they're saying is, yeah, but we kind of know that what we've done, to your earlier point, John, is we've taken a scale, we've cut it straight down the middle, and we've said anything to the left of the midpoint in that scale is one color, anything to the right on the midpoint of that scale is another color. And so what they're saying is, well, we've actually got a model that's 2 scales, but we're going to represent it as being 4 discrete things.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it comes to doing the research, we're not going to submit it to the research as we talk about it, as we present it, as we work with it. We're going to submit a version to the research that we never talk about and we never show, but we know is going to fare more favorably when we submit it to factor analysis. It's all this kind of stuff. So I think the process is really, really back to front a lot of the time. Doug, your point about, what could you be asking? Where are you going to become accredited? I think that would be one as well, about just finding out about the development of the tool and finding out about, what was the process like in terms of that sort of development of a construct, testing of a construct, validating everything like that. Or, was it just that sort of motivated reasoning of we've developed an idea and now we're going to find the proof?
Interesting. I think we've had a really good walk around the world of psychometrics and what good practice and bad practice consists of and what contributes to good and bad practice. I think it's been a great conversation. So I'm going to thank you for your contribution, and we really appreciate you giving us your time and your thoughts.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, William.
My pleasure. My real pleasure.